hopefully all of you had a chance to review the white paper that was sent out last week, and then there's a copy in your packet as well. We've just, in the panel, talked fairly at length about some of the early goals of the organization. And as you know, our mission really hasn't changed that much in 10 years. Our current document that all of you sign off on every 3 years, the principles and objectives are really around collaboration for selection, harvesting, collecting, preserving, and providing access to internet content. And then around just content building, how do we facilitate the international coverage to build the collections and content. And then third, how do we be a strong international advocate for initiatives and legislation that encourage collection building. And I think one of the things that we heard Hornstein's talk about was, we are still very limited when you look at the whole world. Basically, much of Africa and all of Central and South America are not a member of this group. We don't know exactly what's going on here. And how do we become an advocate to the rest of the world? But then I think it's also how we become advocates within our own institutions, in universities, with our researchers. How do we help them understand what contents of web archives are? How do we enable them to use those web archives for their research needs? There's so many things that I think are covered in these three principles and objectives. They're very broad. And we outlined also in the document some specific aims that would help us achieve our goals. That include providing forum, like these meetings here, for education, knowledge exchange, to develop and recommend standards. The WARP standard is one of the ones that we have worked on. And then facilitating the development of appropriate and interoperable, that's a word that I think we just heard Birgit mention, interoperable, preferably open source software and tools, and raise awareness of internet preservation issues and initiatives. Those are some of the things that are outlined as ways we might achieve our principles and objectives. Now, Jill is going to talk briefly about what we've accomplished over the past 10 years that you'll see in Section 2 and Section 3, sort of throw out some provocative questions to get you started thinking. And then, as you can see here, we have 3 questions that we're going to discuss in this group. We'll be asking all of you for comments. I think what we need to know is, are those 3 principles still where they need to be, or do they need to be changed? If they need to be changed, then it may change a lot of what the discussions are later on today and tomorrow. But if they're still accurate and still what we think that our focus should be, then we may be able to move through these fairly quickly. But we wanted to have these in front of you to know that, so you're prepared to discuss them in a few minutes. Yes.
So everybody be honest, who didn't read the paper? All right. I'm not going to repeat the same way. One rainy day, on a Sunday, Kathy asked me to start thinking about the way we would engage this conversation. I sat down at home and I wrote down some of this, which was we're reading together. It was a rainy day, and then I thought of IPC from a perspective of someone who's been his hands in the IPC many years ago and has tried almost all the roles in this organization. Trying to be a technical officer without being a technician, trying to help with communication and even fundraising and organization without being an expert in any of those things, but always trying to make things work better. So I think what I wrote there is the outcome of all the joy and the frustration I've experienced during that long period, and trying to get back to you having left the archiving activity on a daily basis, and and looking back at other organizations or other projects. And people who know me know I'm excessively goal-oriented, which is the source of my frustration. And one thing I've learned is that if you want to do too much, or if you have too high expectations, you just don't achieve anything properly. So one key word for today would be focus, priorities, and still the other thing I've learned during those times is that sometimes things happen, good or bad, that we didn't plan, did not expect. So this organization has the ability to react to that, the unplanned. So we have to find this balance between being focused and being open and agile in a way. And that's tough, but we all have to deal with that in our organizations. So I'm not going to tell you again the story of the IPC. I'm just here to help structuring elements and things with a few keywords that can be used as common language for the discussion we'll have afterwards. And as Cathy was repeating the words we've been signing off again and again every 3 years to say that this is what we want to do, I was trying to look for all the words, much more simple words. But what we accomplish, we build things, we build tools, we build community, and we build collections. And retrospectively looking at what we have accomplished in IPC, one thing that came out to me is that we never managed to do those 3 things at the same time properly. We basically did one after the other. First, lots of tools, which are our original core as an organization. And then we decided to bring more people. And we, in a way, have the same question again today. Should we be more people? And I'm remembering the situation when we decided to move from 10 to 40. Then there was this decision that we were aware we would be less efficient on the technical level, but we would gain the level of visibility we need to survive as an organization. So it's one of the questions, whether it's the same question again or not, that we have to ask ourselves. So step 1, lots of tool building, lots of geeks, lots of development, with a few sympathetic managers who were former geeks. That was the profile of the first IPC. The second we opened and we discovered people like librarians who came in with no technical skills but had the work to say. And their focus was a lot about bringing their skills that was not technical in the organization. And from that we started to do new things that we hadn't done before. One of them was to build collections. And it took us 3 years to talk about how we could build collections together. And then in the third period, we started actually doing it. So yeah, tool, advocacy, collections. The question is what is next? One thing I learned is that we can't do all of it together the best way. So the question that's being asked to you today is, what should we prefer? Or what's our focus? Or which part of each of these missions should translate into an actionable project that we can focus on? So then the provocative questions are, well, are there other things that we're actually doing, like tools, community, and collections, and we don't even acknowledge it, just dropping things. Some of us have been helping each other a lot with working with lawyers, looking at legislations, regulations. Is this an area that we need to outline as important? Education. We've done things in the field of education. We have our first PhD student with an IPC scholarship. We've tried different sorts of workshops. Do we think that the transmission of knowledge in a very limited field like web archiving is crucial or not? Is this part of advocacy, or does it need to be an activity of its own? And do we need dedicated organizations for that? Do we need people that are like public relation people? We already have some. Our communication officer is of that sort. But do we need to develop that sort of skill? Do we have that sort of skill in our libraries that would like to put in action with the IPC? And why not fundraisers together with that? So that's, open up the keywords and look at activities we have and talents we have that we could maybe add to our common resources. So, not to repeat the questions, but put them in a different order, I'd say. What do we have on the table today? We have the question of our resources. We have 2 sorts of resources. We have people in our teams, and we have money. The most important resource is the people we have, and Birgit perfectly summarized the situation in all of our institutions, where all of us, except maybe those Norwegian people who have so much gas in their country, we have, even they do have priorities to make. We experience budget cuts, we experience staff cuts, so whatever we'll give up to the community is rare, and there must be a good reason for that. So that's an issue. How do you organize those resources together in this context? And the second, we have, Clément gave you the figures this morning. We do have some money that we didn't spend in the past. We have about, let's say, 500,000 euros, which is a lot to do meetings, but with is little to develop tools. So we have to consider how we use that money, maybe to give a new meaning to the next directions and make the best use of it. And then if we look at priorities, so tool, community, collections, advocacy, activities, I think I won't repeat that, it's all clear on the table. But I will focus a little bit more on organizational issues, which is your more or less question too. It has been said that I repeat it with different words. We have an organization with a steering committee, a general assembly, working groups. The working groups have been built according to the workflow: harvesting, access, preservation. Does it still work? Are we happy with that structure? Do we need an organization which would be more, like we have seen sometimes in the past, around task forces with a beginning and an end? How do we deal with project management in regard with working groups? What's the interaction? How does that work? How can we maybe improve that? How do you recognize yourself in this organization? We have to be creative, but first of all, we have to start with our goals and then find the organization that will match those goals, not the other way around. That's for internal organization. The other question is our relationship to the rest of the world, or to the other communities, which is more like the third question we'll be addressing in the workshop and in the small groups. There are different ways to look at it. You can ask yourself, how does web archiving in my organization links to other activities in my organization? And from there, look at opportunities maybe to grasp resources. Another is how do we deal with other organizations of the same sort, other heritage organizations. Then you mentioned that, how do we talk to the web players, be it the big players, Google, etc., or the crowd. The crowdsourcing is another way of looking at cooperation with others. And last is the issue of our responsibility or cooperation with countries from other parts of the world that are not covered or involved today in web archiving. I guess let's recap pretty much what we have on the table, and I think, Kathy, you're going to explain the rules of the game.
Well, I think the rules are there aren't any rules. So, I think if we start with this first, and Abby's going to bring the mic around so we can make sure everyone can hear. And while she's doing that, we are going to, after we have this discussion, we're going to break you up into 3 groups. And we have facilitators with each group, and we have additional questions that are quite different actually from these in many ways, to begin to get more individual feedback from you. And we'll have someone there taking notes and reporting out tomorrow. But looking at the first question, are those 3 principal goals and objectives from our current mission statement still on target with where we want to be now and in the next few years?
Hi, I'm relatively new to this organization, but, I'm sorry, I'm Rosalie from the California Digital Library. Although CDL, of course, is not new to IAPC. But, I think just one kind of sticky note, or I don't know what the word is, on the third bullet saying just national libraries, that could be expanded to include, university libraries and others. I guess I would suggest that. And I think something about our end users should be added in, about creating tools that meet their needs, or maybe something that has a nod to sort of the next. It's one thing to build these archives, but then who's using them, how are they using them, and making that a focus important.
Hi, Brenda, University of North Texas.
Brenda is our IPC sponsored doctoral student, so introduce everyone, go by and say hello to her.
Okay, well, hello to all of you all. I just wanted to follow up on what she said, is that I've been doing a lot of work on quality assurance lately, and I have, as you will see tomorrow, I'm presenting on that. But I think that I'm not sure that we completely understand who is using web archives right now. I believe that, I'm sure that I think that people know about the Internet Archive, but as a percentage of Internet users, how many of them know that there is such a thing, or that websites can even be preserved? How much does the general public, I think, knows about web archiving? And do we really, the people who do use web archives, do we know who they are, what their specialty is, what they're researching on, and if they are finding web archiving useful, and are they finding information there that they deem to be of quality and that can be used? I think definitely. So I think we need some information about the users. Just on that.
This is more a comment. I think we probably need to consider whether we have been quite esoteric in how we approach things in general. So, second question, what's the most important contribution of the IPC to the web archiving community? I mean, isn't IPC the web archiving community? Are we not talking among ourselves? We don't communicate enough among ourselves, because I think there was an earlier comment about people have their own work to do when it was referred to the IPC. So IPC doesn't fit in with people's own work. So it's great, this is, we get a lot out of coming here and talking to people, but it's an annual or, maximum biannual happening to most of us. Actually, there are a lot of tools, scripts, little handy tools which have been used and developed by member institutions. We don't have an overview. We don't know what can be shared, what cannot. At a sort of collaborative or collective level, we're not tapping into other communities. I don't know how many of you
the Net Archive in Denmark. Just a comment to Helen's comment and a comment for number two. I think more of number two as to imagine how would the web archiving community have been looking without the IPC, and looking at it that way, I think there wouldn't have been a community like this without the IPC. So probably that's the most important contribution, is actually getting people together. And that might lead into maybe actually another comment for number one here. So I think networking is a strong thing that we are doing here, and this is always at least what I personally get from going here. When I go back, I always pick up the phone and call somebody I met or something I heard about, or write an email, and I get a bunch of emails back about some interesting things going on that I would have never learned about if I hadn't joined this event. So maybe networking should be more explicitly mentioned in the mission statement, or yeah.
I have a question, Helen, something you said about not knowing what other institutions within IPC are doing or developing, or how can we improve that communication? Should we be doing some kind of annual or every 3-year kind of surveys of the members to get some information from them? How could we improve that communication? Does it need to be on our website that what all of our members are doing? Brenda?
Okay, I have quite a concrete answer to that.
Okay.
So when I did a survey, and there are actually a lot of organizations that do web archiving that are not in IIPC, and it would be nice for them to join us. But the first place I turned to was a Wikipedia page that contains the current list of web archiving initiatives. Now, that includes the name of each institution, what tools they are using for harvesting, collecting, and preserving, the amount of staff that they have, and the resources, a bit about how much space they have, how much storage capacity they have for their resources. And something like that is actually extremely helpful. I had no idea if it is actually up to date, if it is accurate or not. Or something like that, the fact that it was on Wikipedia, it was available. Anyone looking up web archiving on Wikipedia can go there and look at who's doing what. So, I know this is a very simple, maybe even a dumb and concrete thing to do, but just the fact that it is out there, it is open. You don't have to go to netpreserve.org to get it. Just that simple list that was updated and hopefully accurate was very helpful to me.
Do you know who wrote it?
I have no idea. I know that I did contribute some.
It's the Portuguese web archive paper about it as well.
Okay, I didn't know that. I know that I did contribute to it, but I'm not sure. It's quite disorganized at some point and could use editing, and it's kind of a hodgepodge, of things right now.
So there's one answer for community.
No, I'm just saying it's just one small thing, but it could have a lot of impact because of the traffic to Wikipedia.
But I might argue that it might be interesting for us to have our member organizations with such information on our IPC website. And it's something that we have discussed, what do we need to have on our IPC website that's not there? And this past few weeks, I've been trying to learn more about the history of IPC and realize that we have really no history of this organization on our website. I think Jilvis at one time wrote an article about the history of IPC, but it hasn't been in French, right? And we haven't translated it. That might be something that we want to do. Because if I were an organization saying I am thinking about joining, the first thing I would look for would be a history of the organization, some understanding of how long it's been there, what its accomplishments have been. I think that's something we need to add to the website. I know it's very hard to get our members sometimes to come and do their own editing of a website and putting information there. People just don't ever quite get around to it. It's sort of like responding to a survey. People don't quite get around to responding to surveys either. But I think that communication within our membership is important, that Helen mentioned. And Tobias, do you have suggestions or ideas on how we can better, as a cooperative, collaborative, be an advocate? I know many of us are in publicly funded institutions, and it's very hard for us to be advocates for ourselves with legislative bodies. Some of you may be able to do that as national libraries in Europe, but I am not allowed to lobby our legislature. our congressional representatives and be, working for a public institution. I think it's a fabulous idea, and we need to figure out ways to do it. But we run into these roadblocks way too often because a lot of the copyright and other such legal rights issues are what's preventing us from providing that kind of broad access to the content. Like Helen was talking earlier, the British Library now they have the legislative mandate to actually be able to collect e-content, but they have to make it available only in their national library system. You have to walk in to use it. So if anyone has ideas on this, Thornstein and also
I think the first step would be that the organization itself is recognized worldwide as the experts on this topic, and this would be the first step to be even invented to discussions about reforms of law. So you have to be recognized as an expert in this area to be part of the process of discussions. That's the first step. And I still think we are not there at that point. And that's why I still think it would be important to have Google and Apple and Microsoft and so on be more involved, because this would also be part of being recognized as the experts. And then it's possible to come into the circles of discussion for new legislation. And of course we need then a lobbyist, the public officer or someone responsible for the IRPC being the lobbyist, going to discussions with politicians and others. This would be then the next step, to be present in all the relevant discussion groups.
Thank you. I think Thornstein had a comment as well. Thornstein had his hand.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I totally agree with what Tobias is saying about the IPPC becoming the kind of recognized body that is responsible for web partnering. I think that in addition to what Tobias was saying about reaching out to the big players like Google and Facebook, what have you not, which is absolutely necessary in my opinion, I think it would be worthwhile for the IPC to simply develop or define a project for advocacy, where the IPC allocates money for it, just like a project, whereby either the program officer or whoever is most suitable for whichever part of the world we are talking about will be able to go, like initially perhaps to the IFLA CTNL conference and talk to all the national libraries at one time, because most of them will be there. Then you would, in addition, also regional communications, which somebody could go to, and then try to reach as many as possible. But that will never be enough. One should also think about going directly. Somebody from the IPC should be going directly to certain parts of the world, maybe take a one-week tour, visiting 5 or 6 key countries in Latin America, in Africa, and so on. I don't think this is going to happen very quickly unless the IPC does this kind of a project.
Good point. Helen was next, and then we had Barbara.
Okay, I just want to actually raise the issue of access. We all know about our legal limitations and technical limitations, which both take time to address and to, achieve improvements. But I think we probably need to take a pause and try to unpack access a little bit. What exactly is we're not allowed to give access to? What exactly are the things which people would like to access, which is not what we're allowed to give access to? So what I'm trying to think are the things which are the so-called low-hanging fruit, which we can do, which we probably haven't explored enough. So based on our access figure, I have a presentation about this on Thursday, but I'm just going to share with you some ideas at the moment. Based on our access figures, statistics, currently the most accessed content from the UK Web Archive are those which have gone offline on the live web. But we haven't done this ourselves, we're planning to do this, but we don't make it clearly visible in the user interface. So it would be great if people can come in. The first thing, or one of the most obvious things they could see is a list of all the websites we have copies of in the archive which have disappeared from the live web. That is not only useful for researchers, but it also presses a few other buttons. You can imagine that stakeholders, founders, who really like to understand the value you add as a web archive. And also there's I would recommend the work of Niels Brugger from Aarhus. He has written a little book called Website Analysis, I think, in which he was trying to establish a framework for websites as objects of study, where he actually applied the context of paratext to web archives. So in there, you actually all of a sudden see that the requirements broadens to include the things we don't consider as part of the document, if you like. I'll give you a very concrete example. So the paratext, the context, those that sort of hands off the documents, but not really exactly part of it. So in applying that concept, in our case, for example, as you all know, prior to Legal Deposit, we had a selective archive, and we have special collections, but our permission success rate is about 30%. What that means is, any special collection we present to the researchers, what they see is only around 30% of 100% selection. That really waters down the value of the special collection. But what we haven't thought about is actually to provide the listing of the 100%, because we might not have a historical copy of 100%, but the 30%, most of the time, as you're on the live web, what provides more value to the research in this case is the complete context. So there are little things we can do while we, as a community, work on improving our technical and legal limitations.
Thanks, Hannah. I think actually Barbara was next, and then...
I will bring it to her.
I should try to say something very important. I'm sorry. I had two things. One of the organizations that we were thinking of in the KB that might be interested for the IPC to contact is the UNESCO, as they care for our cultural heritage. They are renewing their mandate or their starting point, I don't know what it's called, but that's an interesting organization to go. And the other thing I was thinking of is the visibility of our archives, not only, as Helen said, which is, I think it's very important to show what we have and what's not there anymore, so the digital damage that is rescued, so to say, but also to make it clear that there are archives. For example, by sending metadata to Europeana in Europe. Sorry, this is Europe. But so that might also be a string where we could ask more attention for our collections. And I think that's important.
Okay, it was just a comment to Helen. We have archived since 2005, 5 in broadcasting. 38% of the domains we have in the archive is not more alive. So it only needs a few years actually doing this before you get a huge bunch of websites, which is not allowed anymore. Or not websites, domains actually. So this is one thing. I think I come from one of the corners of the world where access has been a big problem when we have had this very restricted. I'm not so concerned anymore. I'm not so negative anymore. And that means that's because I can see that even if we have these problems, there are some movements going on that will actually open up the archive. The first little bit of thing we have now is we have a project that is funded by the research libraries that will give. That is that one of the governmental libraries actually try to move all the content that belongs from the governmental institutions, all the publications and so on, move them outside from the archive, so they will be freely accessible on the on the freenet again, as an archive, you could say, a pushed forward little bit of the archive, and they take all the work on clearing everything, and we just push things out. And as soon as the Library of the Parliament heard that, I had them in the phone and said, oh, if we can do that for all the parties and other sorts of stuff, will you then push all these websites out too? And I said, just bring it on and we will see on it. Because this is what it actually do. We use it as a little can, now, that we try to pull a little off each year. And I hope that in the end we'll actually have another situation for access.
Okay, so in the LOGS program, we've actually spent some time talking with Google. They're just down the road. And there are some caveats here. Google has to be extremely careful dealing with copyright content because they're really worth suing. And we deal with copyright content, and so we have some interests in common. And the things I think that you can get that are worth engaging Google about are things where they can use their leverage over websites to get them to do things that help both of us. So, for example, standards about meta tags are something that where you can get positive engagement with Google because it's in both of our interests. It will improve their searching, it will improve archiving. It's not them doing it, it's them twisting the arms of websites to do it. That's an example of positive engagement. Anything which involves them handling copyright content, and basically that's everything, and in any way working with someone outside to do that, that gets very, very difficult for them. And so I don't think, and we've only talked to Google, I'm sure this also applies to Facebook and people like that, that the copyright law and the US litigation climate mean that you basically can't get them to do anything in that area. But anything that you can present as being something that they can persuade websites to do that is in their interest and in the interest of archiving, that's something you can get to work. And the only example we have are around meta tags in journals, where they have significantly influenced the publishing platforms to do things that doesn't actually help us collect it, but help us get at the bibliographic metadata once we've collected it. So that's a caution. But they do have because of the importance of ranking, they do have a lot of influence over the way websites behave.
I think that's a good point. It's probably something we need to keep in mind with every outside group that we approach, is what do we have in common with them that will benefit both of us. This is the broader picture. Other comments or questions? So, here, Andy, you want to do that?
Just that I'm a little wary of us directly going in and becoming a lobbying organisation. That sounds like it requires extensive skills, particularly a very thorough understanding of the copyright laws in question. However, I think we can very there are other organisations in the UK. There's the Open Rights Group, the Open Data Institute, there's the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and possibly, I know there are possibly W3C as well, where we might find some kind of a way we can act as an agent to get things started. Yes, I like the idea of lobbying for perhaps orphan work-related legislation. There's some room for negotiation there, but I feel we have to partner with an organisation which has more experience in lobbying than us.
Other comments? We're getting close to the end of our time, but have a couple more minutes if others have comments. I think we've got one.
Okay, just one comment here. I didn't really think we should become should become a lobbying kind of community, but still, if it wants to expand in this direction, it has to do it conscientiously, and I think it should be a project, whichever way it will be done. Yeah. The other thing I rather like to hear about this, nobody has really talked about why or what we are collecting. It seems to be that what are the issues, what is the content that we want to preserve? Is it just the intellectual content like in from the academic circles, or do we really believe that's what's going to be most important in the future? I personally do not think so. I think it's the other content, the general content, maybe a lot of Facebook is a case in point. It is very, very problematic because on one hand it is extremely personal and full of rubbish and what have you not, that we never want to collect. But then on the other hand, we have some politicians, you have issues like in the Arab countries that have been, people are saying Facebook was influential, and that's why it's important to know about it. So my comment is, people should be thinking in totally different terms of what it is that will be important in the future, not what you're used to today. That's not the whole picture.
Sorry, I actually had a second point that I completely forgot, which is a lot of the difficulty comes because basically you have to assume that everything that you collect is covered by somebody's copyright. But a lot of it has a copyright release on it, has Creative Commons license. And one of the questions for national libraries is, are you going through the stuff that you collect and allowing access to stuff which specifically says that it can be accessed, or not? And if not, why not?
I think that's not just true of national libraries, that's true of university libraries as well.
We actually do that. Everything that we collect that has Creative Commons on it is freely accessible.
For the library, the UK Web, I am planning to extend the indexing we did during full text indexing to also pull out the machine-readable metadata to pull out the licenses. There's an internal argument to be won about whether that's good enough to be sure that it's okay. I think we'll win that argument eventually, but we have to do a kind of data gathering exercise first of all. 5% of websites in the UK domain have it, and we're pretty sure it really is specifically about that site for this reason, that it built the case. And I think that I hope we'll get the freedom to do that at some point, and it's on my plan, whether it's on my institution's plan, we'll see.
I think we've covered number 1 and number 2 probably. But are there any specific things on number 3 about our strengths and our weaknesses that people would like to comment on here in the next few minutes? So everyone's made their points? Gildas, did you have any last comments? Chris? Sure.
So just following up for a minute on the theme of collaborating more extensively with the commercial sector. I want to go back to something that Professor Michael Nelson mentioned this morning, that if we can get away at times from the guts of archiving and talking about things as web archives that are sometimes perceived by the public as dead and boring and unuseful, and focus instead on this concept of my personal digital collections and wanting to preserve my, my heritage as it plays out on my Facebook page or whatever that is. I do think there's going to be opportunities in this next phase to collaborate with corporations that are focusing in that sphere, with services to, everyday people who are trying to figure out how to keep digital content that they care about around, for 10, 20, 50 years hence. So I think to the extent that we can tap into to those initiatives, that's going to be important. And to the extent that we can get away from sometimes using the same message to all audiences, where we're constantly talking about the guts and the complexities and the technical elements, when what most people wanted to understand is the benefits. Telecommunications is about connecting people, not about all the ins and outs of how that data transits between two telephones. So I think that's another dimension that we can't lose sight of, or we're going to kind of wake up 3 years from now still in a fairly isolated sector and not as integrated with what's happening broadly.
So this is related to trying to enable individuals to say, yes, it's fine to archive my stuff, partly? Is that part of it, or is it completely separate?
I don't think we need to take on the mission of enabling individuals, but I do think we need to adopt language and vocabularies and messaging that resonates broadly across communities in all corners of the globe, rather than only appealing to a very knowledgeable IT space, or only appealing to a librarian community that would understand the ins and outs of metadata. Like, I think we have to figure out how to strike that balance, because that's where our funding is going to come from. That's where pressure in the public is going to help us. And if you can't completely do that through access, we can certainly do that through the way we describe what we do and why people should care about what we do.
Any final comments? Okay, then what we're going to do is to break you up into groups, and Abby's going to help us with this and tell you where each group needs to go, and then I think we have a break, right, Abby?
Yep, we have a break,
and then you can head to your other...
Yeah, 3:30. And then at 3:30,